everyone, it's Leanne here. Welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to show you how I created this fall leaves greeting card, and this is using the Jump for Joy stamp set from Fawn. So I have a card base that's A2 card size, and then I have a piece of watercolor paper that's a 1/2 inch short on the height and width of that A2. I'm using the Jump for Joy stamp set and the Sentiments banner dies here. I used the largest one for this. Now I'm preparing the watercolor paper to start. I'm taping this to the back of my cutting mat. Anything that's sort of a hard flat surface is nice because it will prevent the paper from buckling. Using distress inks, I'm using antique linen, carved pumpkin, and candied apple. Using a number 8 round watercolor brush and an artist palette. I just picked this up at my local art store. So I'm just smooshing some of the paint down onto that artist canvas and adding a lot of water. I'm putting water on the paper first just to loosen it up. I really want the colors to move around and not be so controlled on the background. So I'm starting with the antique linen and then coming in with the carved pumpkin. And the way I started this is I worked with antique linen at the bottom and then carved pumpkin in the middle and then the candied apple to the top. And then I scattered it around, mostly the carved pumpkin as well. My thoughts on the background were that if you had a forest of trees and the leaves were turning color, you would see different dots of color throughout the background. So with the candied apple, the darkest red, I just kind of tapped it in certain spots, just in little clusters, to create sort of that variegated background that looks like a fall foliage canopy, I guess. So I just keep coming back in with the different distress inks, and these work really well with water, so it really emulates the look of watercolor, and I think it's so pretty. And these colors are my favorite. Fall is my favorite time of year, so I had a lot of fun creating this background. And so just putting the finishing touches on this, once I'm done and I'm happy with how this looks, I'm going to set it aside to dry. Now we're going to do the stamping, and I'm using Memento Tuxedo Black ink because I'm going to be using Copic markers to color this. So I've just stamped out the little fox and the rake and the pile of leaves, and then I'm doing 3 rows of leaves. So I'm going to do a row in each of the fall colors that I'm coloring, so red, gold, and orange. Now for the little fox, in the white parts of his fur, I'm using Colorless Blender in Warm Gray 3. And this way it blends out to a really light gray using the colorless blender, and I don't have a lot of gray color, so I'm sort of improvising with that colorless blender. And then because I have a lot of warm tones in my art, I brought in that Y28, which that is the Lionette Gold, and that creates sort of the warm tone as well. So it's not the gray is warm, but this will help bring in the golds as well and make it more harmonious. Now for the fox, I wanted his fur to be a little bit red, and so to do that I put a highlight base color of R85 down first, and then I covered up the entire body shade color with E23, going over that pink as well as coloring the rest of the space. And so that way it sort of creates a unique look. It's not just a brown, you can sort of see the pink popping through, and it makes it a little bit warmer. And then to do the shadows, I'm coming in with E15, which is sort of a medium tone too. It's just slightly darker. So once I get all of the shadows done with that E15, I'm coming in with E19, which is redwood, and just deepening those shadows. And this is a really rich, warm, reddish brown color. This is one of my favorite Copic markers, actually. I love the color, and so it really helps to warm up the fox's fur, and just keeping everything in that same warm tone color palette. And by doing this, it just creates more harmony to the photo overall. So just doing these little considerations really help bring everything together. Now for the rake, I'm using some recycled colors from the fox. I'm using the E23 and then the Y28. And that'll be the wooden handle of the rake. And then using the same colors that I used on the fox for the metal part of the rake, and using more of that warm gray 3, or warm gray 3. Just making it look more of like a metal, less blended. And so here I'm coloring the leaves, starting with the gold. I'm using Y13, and then Y19 is the shadows, so I'm sort of doing an ombre effect where it's light at the top and dark towards the base. And then I came in and picked some random leaves in the pile as well to do in the yellow. What I'm doing for these is I'm shading them with that Y19 around where the leaves overlap, and then coloring the bottom like I did in the individual leaves, where it's darker at the bottom of the leaf and then lighter towards the top. Now for my orange leaves, I'm using R85 again as a base, and then coming in with YR04, which is a really bright neon orange almost, but that R85 helped to dampen it a little bit. And then for my red, I only have two Copic colors that are red, so I'm using R29 as the main color, and then that Lionette Gold Y28 is going to serve as my shadow for this red. And this also, I've not used a lot of Copic colors in this scene. I've recycled a lot of the colors and used them in different ways. And so that really helps too to stretch your markers farther. You don't need so many colors, and you can still make something very pretty and have a variance of color. Now here I'm going to do the background of my card in that pumpkin, that carved pumpkin. So what I found is my watercolor paper is more of a yellow and my cardstock is more of a white. And so I didn't want them to contrast, and so instead I just dabbed a little bit of the carved pumpkin onto my artist palette and just painted around the edges. And so this works two ways. It saves from having to get paper or buy a different paper pad, I guess. And also it works well because the colors match your scene, so it'll kind of synchronizes together. Now I'm using cobblestone from Simon Says Stamp to stamp the little branches here. And I really like this color too, it's so pretty. And so just laying out my scene and seeing how everything's placed, how I want that to look, I'm going to start coming in with my tape roller and adding those elements one by one. Now I've cut my sentiment banner there that'll go across the bottom, and that's cut out of a vellum. And so later I will stamp the sentiment on that and emboss it as well. Now I want to stick down my fox, and I want the rake to be positioned at the same time. So I've just put a little two-way tape on the front of the rake, and I'm just going to stick that to the back of the fox. And then together I'm going to take that one piece and add tape from my tape roller and then put them down in the scene together. So just positioning those. And now it's time to add the leaves. So just one by one I'm putting a little bit of two-way tape on each one. I just cut little pieces of my two-way tape. And then I'm just sticking them down, just scattering them around the branches, and then having a few falling down around the fox as well. So now I'm ready to attach my scene to my card base. Using the tape roller, I just added some tape to the back, and then eyeballing where the center is, I find the center and then just push that down into place. And I'm going to attach this to my A2 card base. This is 5.5 by 4.25. So again, just adding more tape and holding the folded edges up against the desk, lining it up with the edge of my hand. I just press them down into place. And now it's time to do the embossing for my sentiment. Now, this did not record, unfortunately, but I did use Versamark ink, and I used this reddish brown, almost a tomato color of embossing powder to do that embossing with. And then once I used my heat gun to zap that into place and just melt that embossing powder into the sentiment stamp, I'm attaching this with my tape roller. You'll notice I put tape just behind the words. There's probably the best way to hide the tape is to put it behind the sentiment. And so I attached that into place, and then I have one little leaf left over, so I added him too. So there you have it. This is my Jump for Joy fall greeting card. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you're notified the next time I post a video. Thanks so much for watching.